The wind screamed across the frozen plateau, tearing at the thin hood of Ryland's jacket. Snow stung his face like needles, and the cold gnawed through every layer of clothing he had. He barely saw 10 feet ahead. Then he heard it, a low guttural roar that made the ground tremble beneath his boots. Ryland froze. Another roar answered, weaker, almost a whine. He staggered forward, squinting through the blizzard. There, half buried in snow, he saw them, 2 enormous dragons chained to jagged ice spires. Their scales were dulled with frost, their wings crumpled like torn sails. One was smaller, her eyes nearly shut, smoke curling weakly from her nostrils. The other, massive and scarred, lifted his head slowly, eyes clouded with pain. Ryland's heart hammered. Most people would have turned away. Most humans would have left them to die. But he stepped closer. The snow was deep, every foot a struggle, but he could not ignore them. Something about those eyes called to him. Not fear, not anger, but recognition. Chains dug into their scales, glowing faintly with strange alien glyphs etched into the links. The metal was old, rusted, but clearly unbreakable by brute force. Ryland crouched, brushing snow off the closest link, studying the markings. He had never seen symbols like these before. They hummed faintly under his touch, like the ice itself was alive. The smaller dragon stirred. She opened one golden eye, watching him. A low, cracked rumble left her throat. Ryland spoke softly, almost instinctively. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said. "I want to help." The dragon blinked. Slowly, the massive dragon moved his head toward him. It was a tentative gesture, and Ryland understood instinctively. They had been chained for weeks, maybe months. Hunger, cold, and despair had dulled their strength, but their minds were sharp. They judged him, and for some reason he passed their test. A sharp crack split the air, ice beneath the smaller dragon fractured. She twitched, panic flashing in her eye. If the spire broke, she would fall. Without thinking, Ryland bolted forward, hand gripping the icy ledge. He dug his boots in, letting his fingers find every crevice, inching closer. Every step brought him closer to the dragon, closer to danger, closer to something he barely understood. He reached the chain. His fingers touched the glyphs, cold energy surging through his skin. He stumbled back, coughing. The dragons hissed softly, their sounds low but urgent. It was as if they were warning him. One wrong move and all would die. Ryland steadied himself. His mind raced. The chain had to be cut or disabled, but he had no tools. Nothing strong enough to pierce alien metal. Then he noticed the ice beneath the chain. A small fissure ran along its length. If he could wedge something into it, maybe, just maybe, he could weaken the links enough for the dragons to move. The smaller dragon trembled, struggling to lift her head. The larger one fixed Ryland with a gaze full of sorrow and expectation. In that moment he felt the weight of responsibility. He was human, alone, and yet the fate of these 2 ancient creatures rested in his hands. A gust of wind tore across the plateau, blinding him with snow. He shielded his face with one arm and grabbed a jagged piece of ice from the ground. Carefully he wedged it under the chain, testing for leverage. It held just barely. A tiny snap echoed, "Ice, not chain." The dragon's eyes brightened slightly. A spark of hope. Ryland took a deep breath. His teeth chattered from the cold, but determination burned hotter than frostbite ever could. He had no guarantee of success. One misstep could crush him or the dragons or both. But doing nothing was certain death for them. He pressed harder, his hands slipping on the ice. For a moment he feared failure, feared losing his nerve. Then the massive dragon bellowed, not in anger but in encouragement, a deep sound that shook the snow around them. The smaller dragon let out a soft whine, a fragile sound that mirrored hope. Ryland felt something stir within him, something primal, something human. Fear could not paralyze him. Doubt could not stop him. He had to act, and he did. Inch by inch the ice shifted, a tiny crack spreading along the chain. A spark of movement. A small victory, but enough to ignite courage in a human, and in dragons who had almost given up on life. Then, without warning, the plateau trembled violently. Snow cascaded from the cliffs above. The ground split further beneath them, and the chain rattled as though alive. Ryland's eyes widened. Something enormous moved beneath the snow, a presence he could not see, yet felt in every bone of his body. The dragons stiffened, low growls vibrating through the ice. Ryland froze. Whatever was coming, it was bigger than he imagined, and it was heading straight for them. He gripped the chain tighter, heart hammering, mind racing, knowing that in a few seconds nothing would be the same. Ryland barely had time to steady himself before the snow shifted violently beneath the dragon's spires. Something huge was moving through the storm, a presence that made the very air hum. The massive dragon's wings twitched, sending shards of ice scattering, and the smaller one let out a frightened whine. Ryland's breath froze in his lungs, but he forced himself forward. Hesitation would get them all killed. He scanned the swirling white, searching for any sign of the approaching threat. Then he saw them, frost-born predators, six-legged beasts with jagged spines and glowing blue eyes, skimming low over the snow. They weren't ordinary animals. Their claws cut through the ice, leaving cracks that hissed like steam. They circled the dragons with unnatural precision, clearly drawn to the energy of the alien chains. Ryland's heart pounded. He had no weapons, nothing that could harm creatures this strong, but he had his mind. He scanned the plateau, spotting jagged ice shards and broken spires from the storm. Using the jagged ice like stakes, he started building crude barriers around the dragons, his fingers raw from frostbite. Each placement slowed the predators, giving the dragons a tiny window of safety. One of the frostborn beasts lunged, its claws raking the snow where the smaller dragon had been lying moments before. Ryland shouted, waving his arms and throwing a shard at its head. The creature skidded sideways, snarling, leaving deep gouges in the ice. It was enough. The dragon shivered, then lifted her head, golden eyes meeting his with a spark of recognition. A small payoff, trust had begun to form between them. He crouched low, brushing snow off the glowing glyphs on the chain again. The symbols pulsed faintly with energy, reacting to his touch. He realized they weren't just decorative, they were some kind of alien mechanism, keeping the dragons tethered. But how to disable it? He had no tools. Nothing he could use would cut or melt this metal. A gust of wind nearly knocked him over. The predators circled faster, testing his defenses. Time was running out. Then he noticed a small fissure along the ice beneath the chain, the same one he had tested before. It could give him leverage if he worked fast, but the predators were closing in. One misstep, one slip, and the dragons would fall or be torn apart. Ryland swallowed hard, focusing. He wedged a shard of ice into the fissure, forcing it against the chain. A tiny snap echoed, a small victory. The massive dragon let out a low rumble, almost like approval, while the smaller one twitched in relief. Encouraged, Ryland pushed harder. The chain shifted slightly, enough that the dragons could feel it. The massive dragon flexed his wings, testing their movement. Hope sparked in his chest. But the frost-born predators were relentless. One leapt, striking the massive dragon's tail. The beast hissed, whipping back, and chunks of ice flew toward Ryland. He dove aside, sliding on the slick surface, and narrowly avoided being crushed. The smaller dragon squealed, frozen in terror. Ryland's mind raced. He couldn't fight them head-on. He had to outthink them. Spotting a deep crevice nearby, he shouted to the dragons. The smaller one hesitated, but instinctively they followed the massive dragon as he dragged himself toward the crack. Ryland stayed behind, using snow and broken ice to create obstacles in the predator's path. Each moment he bought them was a tiny victory, a payoff for his courage and quick thinking. The alien glyphs glowed brighter as he worked, reacting to the dragon's subtle movements. Ryland realized the energy from the chains wasn't just holding them, it was connected to the dragons themselves. Disabling the chains wrong could kill them instantly. He had to be precise. One slip, one wrong move, and he'd lose not only his life but theirs. Suddenly, a predator lunged directly at him. Ryland dove sideways, rolling through the snow, shards cutting his palms. Pain shot through his hands, but he forced himself up. He grabbed a shard and flung it like a spear, striking the creature in the side. It let out a screech and stumbled back, buying precious seconds. He could feel the dragon's eyes on him, trust and desperation shining in their gaze. Sweat mixed with snow on his face. He pressed both hands against the chain, the cold biting deep into his skin. Tiny fractures appeared along the alien metal. The dragons tensed, ready to spring. The predators hesitated, unsure of how to approach the shifting energy. Ryland had created a moment, a small window where human courage and intelligence could tip the scales. The smaller dragon let out a hopeful chirp, nudging against the broken chain. The massive one lowered his head, brushing the ice shards Ryland had set up to slow the predators. It was dangerous. It was fragile. But it worked. For the first time, the dragons felt a spark of freedom, however fleeting. Then the plateau trembled again. The wind howled, louder this time, carrying the predators' snarls. A deeper rumble rose from beneath the ice. Ryland froze. Something else was moving, something massive, far bigger than the predators. He looked up, eyes wide. The snow shifted violently ahead, and a shadow darker than storm clouds passed over them. Ryland's pulse quickened. The glyphs pulsed brighter, the dragons stiffened, and the frostborn predators froze mid-step. Whatever was coming, it was enormous, and it was heading straight for them. He gripped the chain tighter, teeth clenched, and whispered to the dragons, "Hold on. We're not done yet." The shadow moved faster now, and the wind seemed to grow heavier, pushing against Ryland's every step. He felt it before he saw it, a pressure in the air, a weight that made the snow beneath his boots tremble. The frostborn predators scattered, sensing it too, their glowing blue eyes wide with fear. The dragons stiffened, wings folding close, eyes locked on him as if demanding he act. Ryland's mind raced. He had fought off the predators and weakened the chains slightly, but this was something entirely different. He couldn't see it clearly through the storm, only the massive shape shifting beneath the snow. It moved like a living mountain, and with each motion, the ice around the dragons groaned under the weight of unseen force. He looked down at the chain again. The glyphs pulsed brighter than before, reacting not just to his touch, but to the presence above them. Ryland realized with a jolt of fear that the chains weren't just physical, they were powered, alive somehow. He needed to figure them out fast. One wrong move could fry the dragons or collapse the plateau beneath them. "Okay," he whispered to himself, voice trembling in the wind. Think. He scanned the area. The fissure under the smaller dragon's chain ran deep into the ice. He crawled forward, sliding on snow and shards, heart hammering. The massive shadow shifted again, closer now, sending vibrations up through his boots. He could hear something deep inside the ice, a rumble, a hum, a voice almost calling through the frozen stone. Then it struck him. The glyphs on the chain were not random, they were instructions, a pattern. They pulsed in sequence, reacting to pressure and movement. If he could mimic the rhythm, perhaps he could disrupt the chain's energy without harming the dragons. He clenched his fists, forcing his freezing fingers to tap against the metal, tracing the glowing symbols. Sparks of blue energy shot along the links and the dragons flinched, but did not cry out. The smaller dragon lifted her head, golden eyes focused on him. Ryland caught her gaze. "I need you to trust me," he shouted over the wind. "Just a little longer." She chirped softly in response, a sound so small it could have been lost in the storm, but to Ryland it was enough. The massive dragon roared, low and resonant, shaking the ice spires. It was a warning and encouragement all at once. He realized the dragons were reacting to his courage, to his understanding of the glyphs. They weren't just prisoners, they were partners in this desperate attempt at freedom. He continued tapping the chains, matching the pulses, focusing all his energy on the rhythm of the symbols. A deep, humming vibration ran through the links. The dragons stiffened, wings twitching, then slowly relaxed. The ice beneath the chains groaned and cracked further. Ryland pressed harder, teeth clenched, sweat freezing on his brow. One slip, one misjudged movement, and everything could collapse. Suddenly, the stormlight reflected off a crystal spike of ice, revealing the massive shape in clearer form. A titanic, serpentine creature, scales black as storm clouds, glowing eyes half buried in snow. Its presence radiated raw power, unlike anything Ryland had ever felt. It was ancient, terrifying, and yet, somehow connected to the chains. He realized then that the chains weren't just restraining the dragons, they were part of a control system, designed to keep the beasts subdued beneath this massive creature. The revelation struck him like a hammer. The dragons were not merely prisoners, they were part of something much larger, a mechanism controlled by an unknown force. If he failed, they wouldn't just die, they would be consumed or worse, absorbed into the creature itself. Ryland's pulse quickened. He had no time to hesitate. He glanced at the smaller dragon. Her wing flinched as a spike of ice shifted near her head. "I've got you," he muttered, gripping her scaled foreleg gently but firmly, steadying her while his other hand continued to manipulate the glyphs. The massive dragon leaned closer, resting his jaw near Ryland's shoulder as if lending strength. Trust, connection, understanding, it was fragile but it was there. The glyphs pulsed faster now, reacting violently to the vibrations from the hidden creature. Sparks flew along the metal, crackling in the wind. Ryland gritted his teeth, pressing his palms harder, sweat freezing into ice on his skin. And then, something miraculous happened. A voice, not sound but thought, echoed inside his mind. "Why are you here, human?" He froze. The massive dragon's mind spoke to him. Telepathy. He had read stories, legends of ancient dragons communicating without words, but nothing prepared him for the reality. The dragon was aware, intelligent, and curious. "I'm here to help," he thought back, mentally sending the words. "I can free you. I won't let you die chained." A pulse of warmth ran through his chest. The dragon's chains responded, energy surging but not harming them. Sparks shot from the glyphs as if the creatures themselves were testing him. Rylan understood then, courage alone wasn't enough. He had to act smart, fast, and in harmony with the dragons. The smaller dragon moved slightly, nudging him, offering what little strength she had. The massive one flexed his wings, rocking the plateau, testing the stability of the ice. Rylan realized they were working together. Together they might survive this. Then, without warning, the massive shadow beneath the snow shifted again. A low, ear-splitting crack sounded, ice snapping along the plateau. A spire began to tilt, threatening to fall and crush them all. Rylan's stomach dropped. They were out of time. He gritted his teeth, eyes locked on the glyphs. He pressed harder, matching the rhythm perfectly, and the chains shivered. Sparks flew, light flashing in the storm. The dragons roared, not in anger but in fierce anticipation. They were ready. And then the spire cracked fully. The smaller dragon squealed, the massive one roared, and the shadow moved with alarming speed toward them. Rylan held his ground, palms blistered, teeth clenched, heart racing. The next moment would decide life or death, not just for him but for the dragons and whatever monstrous presence lurked beneath the snow. The storm screamed louder now, snow swirling like shards of glass. The plateau trembled under Rylan's boots, and the alien glyphs pulsed violently against his freezing palms. The massive shadow beneath the snow shifted again, moving faster, heavier, closer. The frostborn predators had vanished, sensing something far greater than themselves. Only the dragons and Rylan remained. The smaller dragon whimpered softly, wings trembling. The massive dragon's eyes glowed brighter, scanning Rylan as if asking, "Do you have the courage to finish this?" Rylan swallowed hard. He did. He had to. The chains shuddered violently, sparks flying along the glowing glyphs. The fissure beneath the smaller dragon's chain widened, cracking dangerously. One wrong move and she could fall into the unknown depths below. The massive dragon bared his teeth, wings bracing against the icy spires. Together they were alive, but barely. Rylan adjusted his stance, digging his boots into the ice. "I can do this," he whispered, teeth chattering, breath freezing in the wind. "I have to." His hands pressed harder against the alien metal. Sparks flew and a surge of energy lanced through the chains. The dragons hissed, wings twitching, scales rattling. But he held firm. The shadow beneath them roared, a sound that shook the plateau and vibrated through Rylan's chest. Ice cracked along the cliffs, snow fell in avalanches, and the wind roared like a living thing. Rylan's eyes widened. The creature beneath the snow was no mere beast. It was colossal, serpentine, scales black as night, eyes like molten silver. Its movement sent tremors through the ground, threatening to collapse the plateau entirely. Rylan had a split second to act. He saw the fissure under the smaller dragon's chain widening further. If he didn't finish, she would fall. If he misjudged the glyphs, the dragons could be fried by the chain's energy. Sweat and snow mixed on his face as he locked eyes with the massive dragon. They understood each other now. This was a partnership of trust, courage, and desperation. He pressed both palms against the chain, tracing the glyph's rhythm as he had before, but faster, harder, synchronizing with the dragon's movements. Sparks shot higher, arcs of blue energy crackling along the frozen plateau. The smaller dragon flexed her wings, testing her strength. The massive dragon leaned against Rylan's shoulder, adding weight and stability as he focused every ounce of his human determination on the chains. The shadow beneath the snow surged upward. Ice exploded, snow sprayed like water, and the plateau shook violently. Rylan's heart pounded. He could feel the raw, terrifying power of the creature trying to pull the dragons back into its control. But he didn't flinch. Humans were not meant to cower. Courage and intelligence were his weapons, and he wielded them with every ounce of effort. With a final, desperate push, Rylan forced the glyphs into a stable rhythm, perfectly matched to the dragon's subtle movements. The chains groaned, sparks arcing higher, then suddenly, snap. The alien metal fractured with a loud, ringing crack. The chains shattered completely. The smaller dragon stretched her wings, golden eyes wide, letting out a triumphant, soaring cry. The massive dragon roared, wings flaring, powerful enough to push back the tremors of the plateau. Rylan stumbled backward, chest heaving, skin frozen and raw, but he stayed upright. The dragons moved, testing their freedom, and the plateau seemed to hold, for now. The shadow beneath the snow, the massive serpentine creature, emerged fully, colossal and terrifying. Its eyes locked on the dragons, then on Rylan. It was ancient, its scales jagged and glimmering with frost energy. It had expected them to remain chained. It had not expected a human to interfere. The massive dragon roared, a sound so powerful it echoed across the storm, challenging the creature. The smaller dragon darted forward, agile despite her weakened state. Rylan stood between them, fists clenched, teeth gritted, knowing he was the linchpin. Courage surged through him. Fear had no place here. He shouted to the dragons, "Now. Fly." The massive dragon beat his wings with all his might, creating a gust that scattered snow and ice. The smaller dragon followed, wings slicing through the storm, trusting Rylan completely. The serpentine creature lunged, massive jaws snapping, but the dragons dodged with a precision born of centuries of instinct, and a human mind guiding them at the perfect moment. Rylan leapt, clutching the smaller dragon as she flew past. Snow whipped past his face, wind tearing at him. The serpentine creature slammed into the plateau where he had been standing moments before, ice exploding in a cascade of death. For a heartbeat, Rylan hung in midair, unsure if he would survive. Then, the massive dragon twisted mid-flight, swooping beneath him and shielding him with his colossal body. Rylan clutched the scales, adrenaline burning through every frozen nerve. The dragons rose higher, wings slicing the storm, carrying Rylan away from the crumbling ice. The serpentine creature thrashed, massive coils smashing the plateau, but it could not reach them. For the first time, Rylan understood, human courage and ingenuity had rewritten the balance of power. These dragons, ancient, mighty, chained by forces beyond comprehension, had survived because of him. Snow and wind tore at his face, but he didn't care. The dragon soared above the storm, roaring in triumph, and for a brief, glorious moment, Rylan felt what it meant to be truly alive, facing impossible odds, risking everything and prevailing not through brute strength, but through courage, intelligence and trust. Then from somewhere deep within the storm, a faint pulse echoed, a signal, a rhythm, a new mystery rising from the snow. Rylan's heart skipped. The chains were gone. The dragons were free. But something else, something larger, even older, stirred below the ice. Rylan looked at the dragons. Their eyes met his, and he knew they trusted him with the next step, with whatever was coming. He clenched his fists, teeth gritted, and whispered, "We're not done yet." The storm raged on. The unknown pulsed beneath the ice. And Rylan, human, alone but unbroken, realized that the true adventure was only beginning. The storm had begun to fade, leaving the plateau coated in a thick blanket of pristine snow. Rylan's lungs burned, his hands raw and frozen, and his teeth still chattered from the cold, but he didn't notice. Around him, the dragons flexed their wings, testing the freedom of the air for the first time in weeks, or perhaps months. The chains that had held them were gone, shattered by courage, intelligence, and an unbreakable human will. The smaller dragon nudged Rylan gently with her scaled snout, a soft chuff of trust and gratitude. She had survived, against impossible odds, because a human had chosen to act. The massive dragon lowered his colossal head beside Rylan, silver eyes glowing softly, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. In that moment, Rylan realized the true weight of what he had done. He had not only saved two magnificent creatures, he had rewritten the rules of their fate. Rylan sank to his knees in the snow, exhausted, but his heart raced with triumph. "You're safe now," he whispered. "I promise." The smaller dragon chirped, wings flaring in a tiny victory dance. The massive dragon's roar rolled across the plateau, echoing like thunder, shaking loose snow from distant cliffs. It was a sound of freedom, of survival, of triumph against forces that should have been insurmountable. He stood, brushing snow from his jacket, and surveyed the wreckage. The ice spires where the dragons had been chained were jagged and broken, shards glinting in the morning light. Deep fissures scarred the plateau, remnants of the shadowed creature beneath. Rylan's stomach tightened. He knew the threat was not gone, only postponed. But for now the dragons were free, and that was enough. The smaller dragon hopped onto a broken spire, scanning the horizon with bright, curious eyes. Rylan noticed the way her wings caught the sunlight, tiny frost crystals sparkling along her scales. Despite everything, she looked alive, vibrant, ready to face whatever came next. He felt a swell of pride. Humans were fragile, yes, but they could shine when it mattered most. Courage, intellect, empathy, these were the tools that had saved them all. The massive dragon extended his wings and lifted off the plateau, circling gracefully above Rylan. He was enormous, terrifying, and awe-inspiring, but he looked back at Rylan as he soared, a silent bond of respect and trust passing between species. Rylan realized, with a thrill he hadn't expected, that this moment was proof of humanity's potential. Humans could stand alongside the greatest beings in the universe and prevail through courage, not just brute force. A sudden wind stirred the snow again. Rylan froze, instincts sharp. Deep beneath the shattered plateau, faint tremors pulsed like a heartbeat. The shadowed creature, the ancient titanic force that had lurked beneath, was still alive. Its rhythm echoed faintly through the ice, a reminder that the world was larger, older, and more mysterious than he had imagined. Rylan clenched his fists, determination blazing in his chest. "Then we face it when it comes," he said aloud, voice strong despite exhaustion. The dragons roared in agreement, or perhaps encouragement, and he felt the surge of connection once more. They were a team now, human and dragons, united by trust, courage, and the instinct to survive. He glanced at the smaller dragon, now hovering beside him, wings flaring in excitement. "We did it," he said, voice almost breaking from emotion. "You're free. We're alive." She chirped again, rubbing her scaled head against his shoulder. It was a gesture of trust, but also of hope, a silent promise that she would follow him wherever the next challenge led. The plateau stretched endlessly before them, a frozen white wilderness that sparkled under the emerging sun. Rylan took a deep breath, letting the crisp air fill his lungs. Every ache in his body reminded him of the fight, of the danger, of the impossible odds he had faced. Yet in that pain was triumph. Human courage and intelligence had prevailed, not by luck, not by brute force, but by persistence, empathy, and quick thinking. Then he noticed it, a faint shimmer in the distant ice, almost imperceptible. The energy pattern of the broken chains lingered in the air, a trail leading deeper into the mountains. Rylan's eyes narrowed. Whatever force had bound the dragons, whatever ancient creature had lurked beneath, it had left traces. There was more to uncover, more danger, more mystery, more opportunity to prove what humans could do. He turned to the massive dragon, wings outstretched against the wind. The creature lowered his head, eyes meeting Rylan's. A silent agreement passed between them. The dragons would protect him, but he would guide them. Together, they would face whatever ancient forces remained hidden beneath the ice. Rylan took a final step forward, heart pounding, snow crunching beneath his boots. The smaller dragon flitted beside him, the massive one circling above, and he felt the surge of possibility. Humans could survive. Humans could shine. Against impossible odds, courage, intelligence, and determination could change the world, even the world of creatures as mighty as dragons. The plateau was quiet for a moment, the storm fully passed, but deep in the ice, the faint pulse persisted. A mystery still waited, older and larger than anything Rylan had faced. And he, human and unbroken, would meet it head-on. He raised his hand, touching the smaller dragon's scaled forehead. "We'll face it together," he said. And for the first time in days he smiled, teeth white against the cold. Above them, the massive dragon roared, a sound of triumph, warning, and challenge all at once. Rylan knew their fight was far from over. The pulse beneath the ice promised more danger, more wonder, and more chance for humans to rise where others would fall. And as they prepared to move forward, Rylan felt it deep in his bones. The world was vast, ancient, and merciless, but human courage, empathy, and brilliance could illuminate even the darkest mysteries. The dragons are freed, alive, and trusting a human who proved courage and intelligence can match even ancient, unstoppable forces. But a faint pulse beneath the ice signals a larger, older, and even more dangerous mystery waiting in the mountains. Rylan and the dragons are just beginning their next adventure.